For many players, the Chinese Triad plot in GTA San Andreas doesn't seem to be that interesting. In our opinion, it's quite the opposite. In general, the role of the Triad in San Andreas can be said to take place on two levels. The first is the war with the organization Da Nang Boys, and the second is the eradication of the Liberty City crime families who run a casino business in the Sin City, thus being a competitor to the Four Dragons casino belonging to the Triads. Added to this is the small subplot of grunting Chinese Ran Fa Li. At first glance, you can say that this character does not contribute much to the whole game, but when we look at the beta finds that have recently surfaced, it turns out that it was originally intended to be completely different, and therefore, we'll cover this particular topic in today's video. We'll divide the episode into 3 parts. The first 2 parts will be about Mr. Ran Fa Li, while the last one will be devoted to a potential Triad thread, which has been completely cut out of the game's storyline. So we start with Ran Fa Li, who acts as the boss of the Red Gecko Tong, which is one of the Triad sets stationed in the United States, at least in the world of GTA. We know practically nothing about the man. You could say Ran Fa Li is a slightly better version of Claude because he can't talk either, but he clears his throat. Moreover, it seems that the sounds he makes are magically understood by other members of the Triad.
No offense.
None taken.
We find you funny.
Look, long as they think Mr. Farley here is in the back.
Your success will be rewarded, Mr. Johnson.
As it turns out, the character of Ran Fa Li, also known as Farley, has undergone many different metamorphoses, which we'll discuss today. What's worth emphasizing is that we learned all this from the game files of the first version of GTA San Andreas Definitive Edition, which were leaked during the launch of the infamous remasters. In the meantime, coming back to the point, what we're going to say now may sound very weird, but at some stage of production, Ran Fa Li was not a man, but a woman, and not just any woman. Namely, looking through the script of one of the missions for the Loco Syndicate under the name Mike Torino, it turns out that the Da Nang Boys gang was originally supposed to kidnap a girl named Farley. Probably now some people may think it's just a coincidence, and rightly so, because in the end, it's not like that in the GTA world. Only one character can be called Farley. And when we look at the Wear Flowers in Your Hair mission script from the Definitive Edition files, it turns out that such a thing is very likely. Well, originally in the mission, Wear Flowers in Your Hair, CJ was supposed to meet one more person who would belong to the team that helped the main character of the game run a workshop in Doherty. And that unknown person was supposed to be a girl named Kylie, who was riding a bike at the time of the mission. Since the unremarkable Michelle Khan, who is a mechanic, appears in the final version of the game, there are reasonable assumptions that at some stage of development, the developers wanted more, and perhaps even all of CJ's girls to get to know the protagonist through the story of the game. In short, CJ would meet each of his girlfriends on missions, as was the case with Denise Robinson and Millie Perkins. With this concept in the back of our minds, we're inclined to say with a high degree of probability that Katie Zahn was originally the Farley we were tasked with rescuing in the Mike Torino mission. Best of all, it would still make a lot of sense since the Da Nang Boys already had a hard time with the Chinese Triad, and Farley might still be important to the Triad, just as a woman. Finally, we will add that both the mission script T-Bone Mendez and Mike Torino are named by default as Farley 2 and Farley 3 respectively. Hence, this is another indisputable proof that Ran Fa Li was intended to be a woman at some point in production. Moving on, it's time to discuss what the role of the male Farley in GTA San Andreas was originally supposed to be. Surely you know the San Andreas mission called Fish in a Barrel. This is one of the few missions in the Grand Theft Auto series that is only a cutscene. During that quest, Ran Fa Li and Carl Johnson signed papers, thanks to which they officially become shareholders in the Four Dragons Casino. Initially, however, this task was supposed to be a full-fledged mission. In turn, the cutscene we know from the final version was supposed to be the end of the whole task. Again, thanks to the leaked files from the first version of the remaster, we can see what this mission was originally supposed to look like. Well, during this mission, we were to escort Farley to the Four Dragons Casino. We know this from the unused text lines that are the intro of this mission, which you can see on the screen right now. Long story short, Woozie insisted on getting in on the casino heist, but CJ was a bit hesitant because of Ken Paul, Macker, and Rosenberg, whom he liked. Also, Woozie mentioned that Ron-Fa Li is coming to Las Venturas soon to sign the papers. Because CJ suspects an attempt to murder Farley by the Italian mobsters, the man decides to go to the airport and escort Farley. It's also worth noting that there is an unused model of a Triad member called Triboss in the game files. Looking at the fact that Farley was originally supposed to appear outside of cutscenes, there's a good chance that this is how Ron-Fa Li was originally intended to look like. This is not a certainty, but there are reasonable grounds for it. Interestingly, on the same day on the streets of the Strip and Camelot, there was supposed to be some kind of carnival, and the members of the Leone Mafia hidden on the platforms planned to take down Farley. What's more, thanks to the game's in-game recordings, we know that the streets were supposed to be barricaded by some large vehicles, and Farley was supposed to be inside the limousine. Unfortunately, we're unable to show you this since we're not familiar with this type of technology, but a few people who professionally deal with beta content can certainly vouch for it. Furthermore, as a curiosity, we must mention that in the final version, there's a kind of remnant of this part of the mission. Namely, during the Snail Trail mission, we can see that Eddie Pulaski is reading a certain newspaper. This is the San Andreas Post magazine, which is, so to speak, the equivalent of the Liberty Tree newspaper in Liberty City. The whole curiosity is that we can see a very interesting headline in the newspaper. Well, there's going to be a carnival in Las Venturas. At least in our opinion, this is an obvious reference to the very mission that is foreshadowing what is about to happen later. Finally, let's just add that the final cutscene in the mission, Fish in a Barrel, was supposed to contain more lines of dialogue, which you can now see on the screen. As you can see, initially CJ was going to mention that the men were late due to the Leone Mafia mobsters trying to kill Farley on their way to the Four Dragons Casino. And the last point of our episode will be the presentation of one of the deleted missions in GTA San Andreas, which in a way concerns the Chinese Triad. A very unusual find for the crowd of players analyzing beta content turned out to be a truly special treat. It turns out that in the very early beta stage, we were supposed to get one more mission from Woozie, which was supposed to take place between the amphibious assault and the Da Nang Thang missions. The strangest thing about all this is that the cut mission was not at all related to the conflict between the Mountain Cloud Boys and the Da Nang Boys. Probably the creators thought about implementing a small thread in which we would see a conflict between the Triad set led by Woozie and some other Triads. This is the conclusion that comes to mind due to the walkthrough of the entire quest. We don't really know the name of this mission or more details, but looking at the dialogue lines and parameters left in the script, we can more or less imagine what we were supposed to do there. CJ's task was to sneak into one of the complexes belonging to the Triad and kill someone important by performing a traditional execution. Our research shows that it may have been Ling Chi, which was a form of torture and execution used in China from around 900 CE until the end of this practice sometime in the early 20th century. What's more, CJ also had to free a male prostitute who was held inside the complex. And to do this, he had to wear a gimp outfit, which, interestingly, is unlocked only in the Key to Her Heart mission in the final version of the game. It's hard for us to say more about this quest, but based on what we have available at the moment, it's possible that Woozie decided that using men as prostitutes was wrong with the Triad code, causing the man to ask CJ with the assassination of a boss of another Triad faction. Be sure to let us know what you think about it. Moving on to the summary, as we can conclude from today's video, Ron-Fa Li was supposed to have a much bigger role in GTA San Andreas. These types of changes hurt the players the most. Things have been removed that did not interfere with anything at all, but added additional gameplay elements, the best example of which is the Fish in a Barrel mission. Out of all of this, it's reassuring that Grove Street Games unwittingly released this valuable information, and we could see what it was all supposed to look like originally. If you like this episode, we recommend you watch 2 videos that are currently displayed on the screen. In the meantime, thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next episode. Take care and see you soon!